All right. So we're going to read Masters of Disaster by Gary Paulsen. And he's got a lot of great books out there, survival books, adventure books. So if you're into those types of things, you might look into those after this. But the reason I like this one is because it kind of gets away from that survival and, actually, it kind of brings it all together. But it's a group of three friends that want to break records. And it can also get you thinking, I'm stuck at home. What records could I break? Now, I'm not going to recommend you try these because these things kind of get outlandish and crazy. But it's an interesting book. So I thought it'd be a good first one to go through and during this remote learning time. You'll enjoy it. Three things I want you to think about while we read this. The first one is what character you relate to and why. Each of these boys has a certain characteristics about them that you might tend to gravitate towards more than others. So you'll have to listen and identify what those are. Second thing, what's the best event that happens in the book or record that is broken or attempted to be broken? And then the third thing, this is a level 6.5 book, so it's kind of up there. And the reason it's so high is because of the some of the big words that Gary Paulsen uses. So while I'm reading, I would like for you to keep track of some of those words that you may not know or recognize or you want to look more into. So, get a notebook or get a piece of paper or just, you can keep track on the device that you're even listening to this on. So, I'm going to think about those things as I read what's this first chapter. Okay. All right. Chapter 1, The Launch of a Grand Plan. I've called you here today, men, because I have an important announcement, one that will change our lives. Henry Mosley licked his finger carefully, flipped a page of densely scribbled notes on his yellow legal pad in front of him. He cleared his throat, looked up, and made eye contact with his audience. Henry's audience was small. Just Reed Hamner and Riley Dolan, his best friends, and they were sitting at his kitchen table after school. But still, he knew that every good public speaker, not to mention every effective leader, understood the significance of looking a man in the eye. Henry Mosley was 12 years old. He had recently watched a documentary about General Douglas MacArthur with his grandfather, an Army veteran, during which he had been very impressed with military precision and choosing words carefully, not to mention examples of bravery and inventiveness. Earlier at school, Henry had told Reed and Riley that he needed to speak with them regarding a subject of the utmost importance and that they should meet at his house at precisely 1600 hours. Reed had been late, of course, because it took him a while to figure out what 1600 hours was. And he was always late because he got lost a lot, even though he only lived 3 streets over. Riley had not only been on time, but he had also brought granola bars and Ziploc bags of fresh vegetables and bottles of water for all 3 of them, because he knew that meetings required snacks. And Riley was always prepared. Always. I am proposing, Henry continued, reading carefully from his notes, that we undertake and implement a series of daring experiences and grand adventures, the likes of which the history of Western civilization has never seen, at least not from 12-year-olds in suburban Cleveland. Reed scratched his ear and looked confused. Reed frequently looked confused. Riley snapped a carrot stick in half and looked thoughtful, his usual expression. Why? Reed finally asked, a hint of panic in his voice. Why are we under what sitting and impla who's sitting? Henry's got spring fever, Riley explained, somewhat dismissively. Henry thought. What I have in mind is so much bigger than that, Henry said. I'm working to create a series of tasks that will prove our manhood, show what we're made of. And if we play our cards right, we just might alter the course of history a time or two, and of course, impress girls and get them to notice us. What made you start thinking about things like experiences and adventures and bravery and what we're made of? Reed was chewing on a fingernail and looking as if he had to go to the bathroom urgently. English class. What happened during 5th period? Riley asked. And what got you talking so official-like, and I don't know, epic? Henry had a way of always sounding like whatever he was currently reading or watching, and Riley racked his brain to remember whether their reading list lately had included any books about military history or Greek mythology. Remember how we read Huckleberry Finn and Treasure Island and the book about how the kid tried to save their father from the space-time continuum thingy, and that other book about the boy who got stuck in the woods after a plane crash? I got to thinking, what would our stories be like? What would an author write about us? Let's face facts. We may be the most boring 12-year-olds on the planet. Now, side note, Gary Paulson, he threw a plug in for his own book there because in one of his stories, the character gets stranded after a plane crash and survives. So you might look into that one. We're not boring, Henry, Reed said in a small voice. Really? Because I've been thinking about our lives lately, and perfect attendance does not count as exciting. Well, we don't just go to school. We also, there's, and then, of course, Reed looked to Riley for help, but Riley just shrugged. Exactly, Henry said. Nothing interesting ever happens. Luckily, I have plenty of ideas. What kind of ideas? You leave the details to me. Henry patted his legal pad confidently. Does that mean you're in charge, like the boss or something? Reed always cared about who was in charge. He was the only boy in his family. He had 3 older sisters and 3 younger sisters, and he never got his way at home. Never. Not ever. Of course not. This is a democracy. We vote on everything. Then I vote no. I don't want to complain or worry anyone, but adventures sound dangerous, and I have a curfew. I don't have time to change history. If I have to be in the house by 8 o'clock on weekdays, or whatever the new way of saying 8 o'clock is. The voting starts later when I tell you each the plan. The idea to go ahead with becoming men of action and daring, masters of adventure. Well, I've already made that executive decision for all of us. Like I said, my curfew is 8 on school nights, and that's only if I've gotten my homework done. And doesn't that daring usually mean painful? I don't like pain. There might be some pain, Henry allowed, but not much. Probably. Hardly any. Maybe a little, but no blood. Definitely no blood. Okay, maybe a smidge, but nothing to worry about. To Reed, Henry sounded as if he'd be disappointed if there wasn't pain and blood. What do you think? Reed looked at Riley, who had been taking notes. Riley's mother was a reporter, and his father was a court stenographer, so Reed and Henry were used to seeing Riley quietly scribbling in a notebook, but not only in class, but during routine conversations. Riley's attention to detail had resolved more than a few arguments over the years when they went back and consulted his jottings. He wasn't a big talker like Henry, and he wasn't a nervous babbler like Reed. He just took notes. I want to see what happens, Riley said, now looking up from his notebook. I'm in. See, even without a formal vote, majority rules, Henry said, smiling. Reed put his head between his knees and tried to breathe slowly because he'd heard that this technique made your heart stop racing and helped the swirly blobs in front of your eyes go away. The upside-down position only made his ears ring more loudly. I'm going to tweak the ideas for a few more days, Henry said to the top of Reed's head, and we'll reconvene this weekend and get started. Reconvene? Reed asked. Do you mean meet up? Don't worry, Reed, Riley said. I know a website where you can draw up your last will and testament. Although he was only 12, Riley had already written several drafts of his own will. He liked to be prepared for any eventuality. See how interesting things have gotten already, Henry asked. Did you think when you got up in the morning that you'd be writing a will in the afternoon? My plan is revving things up around here. I'm not sure I'm the kind of person who was meant for an interesting life, Reed said, raising his head. I think I'm an inner courageous guy, might be hibernating, or maybe non-existent. That's exactly why we need to start doing interesting things that will build our character, Henry said. Otherwise, we would wind up like Dwight Hauser. Reed and Riley both frowned. At their school, Dwight Hauser was another way of saying stuck-up pushy jerk, puke-spewing slimeball, or nose-picking booger-eating punk. Dwight Hauser was an out-and-out bully, but Henry, Riley, and Reed knew that he was yellow clear through because he only picked on girls or younger kids. Hauser was always surrounded by a rumor-spreading group of tiny-minded toadies who had been scheming for years to slip iguana poop into the beef stew in the lunchroom. Well, if you put it like that, Reed said, I guess I'll keep you guys company, if you insist. You wait and see, Henry said. You're going to wind up thanking me coming up with this plan of action. I have a feeling, men, that this is going to be the best thing that ever happened to us. All right. So far, based on these 3 characters, Who would you say you're most like? You may not be able to make a decision yet, but it seems to me that Henry's kind of the leader of the three. Reed, we know he's he seems to be a little more nervous about things, but he's trying that breathing to calm down. Riley, he's organized, shows up with the snacks, and takes notes on everything. So maybe you're more like him. We don't know any record-breaking things yet. We just know that they're in the works. Henry's kind of planning things out. We heard several big words in there. Stenographer, you know what that is? Has something to do with the court. I'll give you that clue. He uses words like precision or utmost importance, dismissively. So you got a lot of words to choose from in there. And as I'm reading, you have the benefit of being able to pause me. Where in class you can't. So see, maybe this remote learning thing not so bad, right? One thing I like is that Henry thinks they are going to be masters of adventure, but the title here is Masters of Disaster instead. So think on that. Predict what might be coming. What records might be attempted to be broken. I mean, you kind of got the cover there, right? So maybe that has something to do with it. Who would you think is who? I mean, you got a guy on a bike, and you got two guys in the window. Kind of makes you wonder who's who there, right? Maybe think about that. Okay? Till tomorrow.